just never thought it could happen to me, to my own family. It just felt like we were trapped in this black hole of anger and resentment. Like the walls were just closing in on me. Like I was in the trash compactor from Star Wars, and I'm Luke Skywalker, and there's Princess Leia, who I don't know is my sister yet. And even though Han Solo's trying his hardest to save us, he's driving me crazy. And then there's Chewie in the corner just going, "Roar, roar." Anyway, then the holidays roll around, and it's just like Christmas to bring out the worst in all of us. All those long-standing grudges and unresolved family conflict just seem to rear their ugly heads this time of year. The last thing I wanted to do was go to the annual family holiday party. Then my doctor told me about Reconcilosec.
Reconcilosec is the safe, easy, and effective way to bring relational reconciliation to you and yours during the chaos that Christmas brings. Reconcilosec is recommended for all occasions where friends and family need a little help getting over those long-held resentments and bitter grudges. Reconcilosec is not for people who are dating or engaged or may become engaged during the holidays. Reconcilosec should never be taken with in-laws. In lab tests, in-laws taking Reconcilosec showed no improvement over those taking a placebo. Relational conflicts involving money or inheritance also showed no improvement. Take Reconcilosec at least 30 minutes before any anticipated conflict. Sharing Reconcilosec with others may increase your chances of reconciliation.
So if you're looking for immediate reconciliation with the ones you're supposed to love, look no further. Ask your doctor if Reconcilosec is right for you.
Thank you, Reconcilosec.
Ask your doctor about Reconcilosec. Side effects may include excessive hugging, chronic hand-holding, inexplicable affection for in-laws, and sloppy kisses from aunts and grandmas. Exceeding recommended dosage may result in marriage proposals or pregnancy. If you experience a reconciliation lasting more than 24 hours, that means the drug is working. Other side effects include dry mouth, headache, diarrhea, diphtheria, vomiting, dizziness, earache, nosebleeds, loss of vision, loss of hearing, euphoria, sudden paralysis, leprosy, and plague.
I love that video. Wouldn't it be great if all we had to do was take a pill? Unfortunately, that isn't the way it works. And yet, God calls us all to take the cross and to take it and walk with this alongside Jesus in this journey of life that can be very challenging. We're talking about entering people's worlds. And why do we need to do that? Well, we do that because Jesus entered our world. Hebrews 4:14 through 16. Therefore, since we have such a great high priest who has gone through the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God, let us hold firmly to the faith we profess. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet was without sin. Let us therefore then approach the throne of grace with confidence so that we may receive mercy and find grace in our time of need. Jesus entered our world, so we can enter others' world. So what does that look like? Well, we're all similar. We learned diversity is a common thing. God didn't create us all the same. In fact, he actually created us all very different. So we want to be careful that we don't assume that just because we think that or we have learned this or interpret it this way that someone else does. So we say, don't assume, ask. I mentioned the other day, when you assume, you sort of commit a suicide, and it can be a real problem. Ask people to clarify what they mean when they talk to you. With really real-life, concrete statements. If somebody comes back from their home visit over the holidays and says, man, things are really awful at my house, what does awful mean? What does awful look like? Those are kind of things that you can help you have a dialogue with someone at a deeper level. And ask people to explain why they may have responded the way they did. I learned this early on, and well, let me give you this. If you, as an individual, begin asking yourself these questions, it will be much easier for you to see. So when you reacted the way you did, why did you react that way? What were you hoping would happen by reacting that way? What did you want the other person to do with that information when you reacted that way? I frequently would have people this one woman had called and said, if I just could get the elders to hear me, I just want to talk to the elders of my church. I just want to be heard. That's all I want, is I just want to be heard. And I said, well, what would that look like? And she said, well, I would have an opportunity to tell them my whole story. I said, okay. What do you think they would do if they heard it? And she said, oh, well, they would automatically, and then she paused. And she said, I don't want to just be heard, do I? I said, no, you have a distinct expectation of what they would do if they heard your story. And she was very surprised by that. She hadn't realized that she had been holding that there. So I also say, learn to ask questions without using the word why. Why is kind of a confrontive word. Why'd you do that? We've taught our conciliators, try to ask questions that are getting to the why, but aren't necessarily using the word why. It's something to ponder and think about. Well, how do we do that? Well, let's say that you are in a situation in which somebody needs help and you need to try and understand how you can help them. Well, you want to learn to ask really good questions. Now, you'll learn, as I've been sharing all this, did you not notice that a lot of what I've been talking about aren't just things that you could utilize in a conflicted situation where you're helping someone or you're coaching someone? These are just naturally good communication things. For instance, ask open-ended questions, not closed-ended questions. If you think about it, how many of you watch news, the news shows, news channels, CNN, Fox, or one of those? Yeah. If you've ever watched those, this is one of my little pet peeves. News reporters tend to ask questions where there's a yes and no answer, and then the other person talking, it's their job to expound on it. But the question is really a closed question. They do this more often than they should, I think, but it's more or less them wanting to get someone to affirm their position more than it is about the news. It's very common these days for it to be more opinionating than it is about actual news. But learn to ask open-ended questions of people so that they have an opportunity to answer something rather than just saying yes, no, because if a person's kind of an introvert, they're probably not going to tell you more than yes or no. And then you're going to have to figure out how to draw that out of them a little bit more. We call them survey and focus questions. Survey question would be like, so when you had this fight with your mom, where were you? That's just kind of a survey question. A focus question was, so what's the relationship with your mom been like all these years? That's a little bit more focused. That's a little bit deeper question. Questions that reveal what it is you need to know. When somebody comes and they expect you to give them counsel on something or coaching on something, there's sometimes things you don't know about the situation and you need to know them in order to put them in the right context. When I would mediate and I'd ask questions, somebody might say, well, we were all around the dinner table that night and he was super angry. Well, what did that look like? Oh, well, he just sat there really quiet. Did anyone else know he was angry? Oh, no. Now, when you heard the words, he was really angry, did you envision someone kind of really flaming and stuff coming out of their ears? And it helped me put things in context. So you want to ask questions that help do it. And we also say ask questions in a progressive line. Don't ask the heaviest question first. Kind of build on it a little bit and let it unpack when you're talking with someone. And finally, you want to remember that you are not, I use the term guru, but you're not the expert. You don't have to be the expert. Really, what I did on the phone for years was I didn't really give people any rocket science information. I wrestled with them over the issue. Yeah, that sounds really hard. I don't know what I would do in a situation like that. What do you think you should do? What do you think God would have you do? What do people expect you to do? What do you want to do? Which one of these is the most biblical? If you did this, what would the result most likely be? How would you say it? Where would you go? I mean, we wrestled and discussed versus telling them what to do. It makes a big difference. And remembering that our purpose is to connect people to a living, active, redeeming Christ. We can share their experience. We can be in the same spiritual family, but we're never above them, no matter where we are in our walk. Because the wonderful counselor is working on everybody in the room. I can't tell you how many times I'd be sitting in a mediation and somebody would describe something that they had been wounded by, and I would hear myself think, oh my word, I've done that before. I'm guilty of that. Or I would hear a truth come out where somebody encourages another person, and I put a note on my paper with a big A and a circle around it. And it was a way for me to go back and say, Annette, that's for you to remember. God is working on everyone. Truth always adapts and comes down to earth. It wears the clothes of this person's life experience. You want to listen well to people, and you'll find their stories and metaphors, which you'll be able to speak well into their lives. Well, there's 4 ways to kind of organize a conflict or a story. And that is, there's the situation that's going on. There's the responses that people have. And there's the thoughts that people had. And then there's the motives that people have. These are the questions. What is going on? What does the person do in response? What does the person think about what is going on? And what does the person want about what is going on? These are 4 questions that you can always ask yourself. Now, for instance, let me give you an example that I will unpack here in a minute. An example is, the situation was one night my husband and I went out to dinner when we first started at the ministry, and we had a big fight. He was ignoring me, and I was frustrated that he was ignoring me. So that was the responses that we were having. I thought it was because he was being just typical, and he thought I was being unreasonable. And my motive was to get him to show me some attention, and his motive was, well, I just was trying to get through the evening. So those are just some basics that I will unpack here in a minute. So let me tell you a little bit more about conflict in the heart, and I'll unpack that evening for you. We talked about getting the log out of your own eye, that you as a hypocrite will have your log stuck there trying to help someone else instead of first thinking about what's going on with you. And that was something that you need to learn to do when you're in a conflict. Where is your heart at the beginning? When you're seeking to help other people, you want to remember that they will want to blame the other person for their sinful response. We all do that. We all want to blame the other person for what we have done. Remember the glass illustration that I showed you? That you have a glass of water, you hit it, and water comes out, and we say, well, water came out of the glass because you hit the glass. And I would say, no, water came out of the glass because water was in the glass. You could hit it all day with an empty glass, and no water will come out of it. We sin because sin is in us, not because somebody makes us sin. And when that happens, when they hurt us or wound us, it's simply an occasion for our sin to come out. Because out of our mouth, our hearts speak. So, what's going on in conflict? Well, first of all, desires have a tendency to get out of control. James tells us that. Desires battle within us, and they lead to sinful words and actions. Well, what is an idol? Well, an idol is anything that replaces God, right? Well, idols have a little bit more depth to them. Idols are something we set our heart on. It's something we trust, we fear, we serve. These are words of what? These are words of worship. Have you noticed? We sing about this. We fear God, we trust Him, we want to serve Him. But idols tend to be functional gods. In that moment, this thing becomes more powerful to me than something else. John Calvin said that idols, the evil in our desire often is not in what we want, but that we want it too much. We know that every natural impulse, however innocent in itself, may stand between God and us and so become an idol. Well, what happens? Well, it starts very simply. It starts with wanting something nice. My husband and I were working at Peacemakers. We just started. And we were living in Gary's basement, the one that spoke the other day, while we were waiting to find a house to buy. And so in the evening, sometimes we would go out to dinner, and we had some gift cards. And I wasn't cooking in those days, obviously, because it wasn't our house. And it was getting close to 5, and I called Rick and said, what do you want to do? Do you want to go home and eat with Gary and Laurel? What do you want to do this evening? He goes, oh, we have that gift card to Olive Garden. Let's just go there. Oh, okay, that sounds really good. And he said, I'll call you when I'm ready to go. I said, this is great. So I'm up in my office thinking, oh, this is going to be fun. We haven't been out to dinner in ages. And even though it's Olive Garden, not always my favorite place to go, it's not bad. So we'll go out. And I'm envisioning what this is going to be like. And I thought, there we will be sitting at the table, and we'll be having an opportunity to look at each other and talk. And I'll tell him about my day and who I've chatted with and how I feel like I'm being used in ministry. And Rick will tell me about his day, and he'll tell me how he's been used in ministry. And we'll just enjoy being together so much. And he'll look at me and go, honey, this is wonderful. We've never been able to do this sort of thing together. We used to fight, and now we have peace. And let's go to the mall and go shopping. I had a vision for my evening, and it was going to be good. That desire to celebrate with my husband was pretty big. I remember running an errand before the end of the day, and as I was in the grocery store, there was a magazine saying that dating your spouse was a good idea, and I had all these affirmations that what I wanted was good. This was a good thing to do, right? Well, I didn't realize that as that afternoon went on, that desire had really turned into quite the little demand. Because about the time 5:30 rolled around and Rick had not called me to say I'm ready to go, I'm thinking, why is he not calling me? You know, this always happens. He works, and he kind of forgets what time it is. And so I called him, and I said, honey, do you want to leave sometime soon? And he said, what time is it? And I said, well, it's 5:40. He goes, really? Oh, man, time just went by. And I thought, yeah, we've been here before. So he goes, well, yeah, just a minute. I'll be done in just a minute. 20 minutes went by. He was not done. I remember thinking, okay, I'm always the one that calls him. I'm not going to do it this time. I'm not going to be the one to call him. Another 15 minutes went by. I thought, you got to be kidding me. He's not calling. So finally I packed up my bag and I went downstairs to his office, and he was on the phone. He hadn't even made a move to pack up. But I could tell that the phone call was important, and so I just let it go. Thought, okay, maybe I can just overlook this one. And eventually he finished, and we went out to Olive Garden. And I'm thinking, okay, maybe we can pick this momentum back up. Well, we'll get there. So we get into Olive Garden, and he's on the phone as we walk in. He gets another call. And at the time, he was in charge of the ministry relations division, so churches called him all the time. And he was in the middle of a couple of interventions, and he was trying to coordinate those. And we sit down at the table, and he is on the phone through the ordering, and the salad comes, and he finally gets off of the phone. And so I'm thinking, I'm being real patient. I'm really patting myself on the back. I haven't got upset yet. And he looks at me, and he's got this blank look on his face, and then his eyes lift up above me, and he looks over and goes, oh, there's Jerry. And he goes walking over to say hi to Jerry. And I'm thinking, what? So I'm eating the salad. He comes back. He's eating a little bit of the salad. He's telling me what he and Jerry talked about, and the food comes, and then his phone rings again. And he looks at my face, and I think he can tell I'm not necessarily very happy. He goes, well, he made it short and got off. And by this time, I'm pretty ticked. I'm pretty mad. Okay, this was going to be our evening, and now you have blown it, honey. You have blown it. And how many times have you done this before? Fine. If he doesn't want to talk, neither will I. So I got quiet. He didn't seem to notice. So we left the restaurant that night, and he still didn't notice that I wasn't talking to him. So when I got in the car, I made sure to slam the door, and he still didn't notice. So then I'm thinking, well, then I'll just give him the cold shoulder, and, and to kind of put a little power behind that, you kind of turn towards the window and look out the window, He didn't notice. We got home, and finally he goes, are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. I mean, husbands know that line. You're not fine. And he just said, no, you're not fine. I said, no, I'm not. This was our evening, and you spent the whole evening doing other things. He goes, well, you know how important those phone calls were. And I said, yeah, I know. And he said, yeah, what, did you expect me to just ignore Jerry across the restaurant? No. Well, you can imagine this went into a full-blown fight. Well, what had gone on? What had gone on in my heart that day? Just look at this illustration. It started with a desire. I would like to have dinner with my husband. But I need to have a dinner with my husband in order for our marriage to be better, is what happened. So that automatically set the expectation that he needs to do certain things in order to show me that we're having this romantic or whatever evening. And when he didn't do it, I got disappointed. And when I got disappointed, everything he's ever done wrong became that evidence to strengthen my position. And then after that disappointment, I just declared him guilty. I'm sorry, but you didn't come through for me, so you deserve to be punished. It's okay then for me to slam the door. It's okay for me to give you the cold shoulder. Now, you'd be surprised how many of us become the police officer that arrests the guilty person, we become the prosecuting attorney, we become the judge and the executioner all in one fell swoop when somebody does something wrong. We become the final determination of their guilt. Scripture tells us that's not right. We are called to love one another. I could have at one point said, honey, I would love an opportunity just to visit with you. Is it possible to do that? Or would you be willing to do that? And he probably would have said yes. What I discovered later on as we got to talking and as my voice escalated, he finally said something that woke me up. It was something that had gone on for probably 30 years. Remember, we've been married 38. He said, when you talk in that tone, I don't hear what you're saying. All I hear is the tone. I said, what do you hear? And he says, disrespect. That's all I hear. You can say all you want, whether it's truth or not, I don't hear it. And it was the first time it dawned on me my delivery, my words were my fault. I don't know why it took so long, but I'm grateful that my eyes were open that night. So the questions to ask yourself when you find yourself slipping down this slippery slope of idolatry is what we call it. What is it you want? How have you turned the desire into a demand? Let me go to that slide. How far down the slope have you gone? And how can you change or get off that slope? At what point do you need to get off? I mean, you can, and we all know it. We stop right then and there and say, Lord, I'm letting this get out of control. I'm not thinking about their best interests, I'm thinking about mine. And it's okay to punish and judge people because they've hurt me. Now, the first time I realized that that wasn't biblical was 1 Corinthians 10:13. How many of you know that verse? There's no temptation taking you, but God is faithful. He'll allow you a way of escape that you can bear up under it. It's common to man as well as part of that verse. That verse basically says, and I remember this because Rick had come home from a church intervention and was telling me how powerful it was. And he had told me just how this verse was something that they used in that intervention to help the people understand that their sin was not justified. I said, well, what do you mean? He goes, well, you know that verse. And he read this verse to me. And I said, I knew it. I'd memorized it when I was 10. He said, Annette, it means there's no excuse for your sin. You cannot just automatically do something and say, well, it's okay, I did that because they did this. There's never a time when our sin is justified, even when people treat us wrongly. That called me to a real, wait a minute, you mean when somebody hurts me, I'm not justified in hurting back? It's understandable, it's human nature, but it's not okay. That's a whole different way of looking at it. So what should our response be? And when you're talking with someone who's in conflict, you need to help them understand this. And the best way to do it, understand your own heart. So what are some idle searching questions? Well, when the emotions rise, what are they angry about? What pushes their buttons? Do they feel frustrated? What makes them feel that way? What is it leading you to feel? When people do things, they're encouraging you in some ways to maybe head in the wrong direction. But ask yourself, what is it you wanted it to look like that it's not? Do you know one of the biggest reasons why most of us are hurt? Because we wanted it to be more. And we have to recognize that that relationship may need to be more. It should have been more. Parents don't love kids well sometimes. And when you guys have conflicts with your parents and you come back and you're confused, wait a minute, parents are supposed to love. I didn't feel loved in this last gathering. What's going on here? Things are colliding. Sin is colliding. Their sin with your sin. How do you figure that out? You stop and ask yourself, Lord, what do I need to do? Now, you could probably sit down and say, my parents shouldn't have done this, and they shouldn't have done this, and they shouldn't have done this. That's okay. You can identify when people have sinned against you, because they will. There's no doubt about it. But you have to ask yourself, where is my heart tempted to sin back? And I don't want to sin back. So how can I respond differently in this situation? And what should that response look like? It starts with having the right attitude in your heart, glorifying God, being willing to acknowledge where your own desires have got out of control. Doesn't mean that desiring my parents' love is wrong. It simply means I can't let it become a demand. And I can't punish them for not loving me rightly. Now, if you struggle with that statement, I would remind you that there's somebody who will punish them for not loving you rightly. There's somebody else who holds them at a better accountability than you. And when you have that theological position, you're able to love because you aren't fearful about the fact that God won't be able to exact the justice he wants to exact. He'll exact it on them and he'll exact it on you. Most often for those of us who are believers, it's through the mercy of Christ that he exacts it. He wipes it away. But think about that for a minute, because when I'm here, I hear students talk, and so many of them want desperately to change their family dynamics. Your job is to change the dynamics by you being changed. I think I said yesterday, we all think, or in our talk, we all think that we can change our relationship without changing ourselves. Our changing won't change the other person. But the goal isn't to change the other person. The goal is to let God transform you. And that's an amazing thing that it can occur even in conflict. Well, moving forward, this is a lot of information. I don't know exactly where it all fits. It's a lot of good detail, a lot of good clarification. I'm going to give you a simple thing. 2 things that we teach kids in a thing called Young Peacemaker. And it's called the Stay Act. It's one of my favorites. I use it. Whenever I find myself getting stuck, I'm starting to think those thoughts and that wheel of bad stuff, when I relay a problem and I'm thinking through and I'm confessing the sins of the other person in my mind, when I do that, I stop. That's the first part, the Stay Act, stop. Okay, now what are you trying to do? Why are you running this through your mind? Because I know I'm wounded. I know I'm legitimately hurt. What somebody did may not have been right. But I'm using it to justify my unwillingness to love my enemy. Loving my enemy says that I will pray for them, do good for them, and I will bless them. I'll speak well about them. I'm refusing to love my enemy. So the first thing I'll do at that point is I will pray for the person. Lord, I don't know how to love this person. I don't understand how to fix this problem, but you do. And today I don't need to reenact their wounds against me in my head. Instead, I need to remind myself, we need more reminding than we do informing, of what your son did for me on the cross so I can walk forward. So review or understand what you see as your options. In certain situations, you can't do a whole lot. And so the Stay Act tells you to stop, think. It's kind of reviewing through those options. What are my options in this situation? Sometimes my options are just simply to walk faithfully every day, waiting to see what God's going to do. Sometimes it's saying, not giving people an opportunity to sin against me again. It's wisdom in the relationship. I'm not talking about boundaries necessarily, but I am saying, if every time I run into that person, all they do is attack me, probably should limit my run-ins with them, you know? It's just wisdom that says we think that through. So stop and think, what are my options in this situation? And then act. Plan a process forward. If my process is simply, Lord, I need to spend at least 20 days or a month here thinking through what you're trying to teach me, feel free to do that. Just because we're convicted doesn't mean we have to turn around tomorrow and do everything. Let's think this through, and let's make sure that God is really working on us first. So stop, think, act, and the last one's really simple. It's, yay, we get to do the right thing. So the stay act, something I use all the time. Another one, when you're considering, is wise way choices are better than my way choices. Wise way choices say, I'm going to think of what God would have me do in this situation instead of what feels good in this situation. What would feel good to tell them off? What would feel good would be to send out that letter? What would feel good would be to post that picture on Facebook that actually makes them look stupid, or to text them a bad comment, or to tweet something that isn't helpful. I mean, that's what feels good. That feels like good revenge, right? And that's not what we're told to do, and we all know that. And ultimately, get some wise assistance and counsel. People who seek counsel are wise. That's a good thing to do, and you have so many people here on campus that can be helpful, or other students that can be helpful. Now, finally, we have proclaiming the gospel. What do I mean by that? It's important for us to be able to share the gospel with other people, to really be able to, and what I mean is not testifying on how they're saved, but reminding them what God has done for them in Christ. That is powerful. About 10 years ago, we began incorporating this in our training. And it was an eye-opener to me. We would sit there in our training with people, and they would take the word, and they would turn to the person next to them and say, this is what God says to you. And they put their name in the scripture of encouragement, that he has loved you with an everlasting love. And just to hear somebody say that to you is powerful. Very, very powerful. Remember what I said, by instinct, habit, and enculturation, we tend to think of coaching as a human-to-human interaction, but it's really a human with Savior interaction. And by proclaiming the gospel to them, you are drawing them to the reminder that this life isn't just about them. It's about what God wants to do to them. So as we've been sitting here, you may have thought, okay, I know I have some idols in my heart. I want the perfect life, or I want this and I'm not getting it, and I know it's causing me to be angry or hurt inside. God has an answer for that, a cure for that. It's simply reminding yourself that you have faith in Christ. It's repenting of the ways in which you've tried to take control of your own life. It's confessing this to God, and where you need to confess to another, you do that, and asking for forgiveness. Now, you have God's forgiveness, but he tells us if we confess our sins, so he calls us to confess to him, acknowledge our sins before him, and be reminded of forgiveness. Let me read some of the verses that have been the most helpful that I've given to people on the phone that we've already kind of read a little bit. That's 2 Corinthians 9:8, and God is able to make all grace abound toward you, so that in all things, at all times, having all that you need, you will abound in every good work. You can move forward without any hesitation by simply agreeing that God is able to make the grace that you need to move forward rightly in that conflict, that situation, that relationship. And this is the gospel we need to be sharing to people that we're coaching. They need to hear this. Let us then approach the throne of grace with confidence so that we can receive mercy and grace in our time of need. Or Psalm 118:8. It is better to take refuge in the Lord than to trust in man. His divine power has given us everything we need for life and godliness through our knowledge of him who called us by his own glory and goodness. Through these things, he has given us very great and precious promises, so that through them you may participate in the divine nature and escape the corruption of the world caused by evil desires. That's how we protect ourselves from our desires getting out of control. Well, you're going to be gifted with being able to leave early today, so you're not here that long. But before you go, I want to tell you a little bit about, my story isn't exciting at all in my mind, but it's been a real interesting journey. I'm not an adventurer. I prefer, when I married my husband, I met him, by the way, at 16 at a Christian camp. He became a Christian that summer, We married at 20. It's pretty young. And I remember on our honeymoon, driving in a van up the coast of California, because I grew up in Sacramento, thinking to myself, what have I got myself into? Because he was so quiet when we got married. And all the way up California, he talked. I think he was hoarse by the time we got up there. And as I heard him, I thought, he's not what I expected, but better. But this is interesting. It wasn't what I knew how to respond to. Like I said, people may have heard, we've moved 29 times in 38 years of marriage. He's had many jobs. I think we counted up the other day, I think he's turned over 175 different cars. He rode a Harley for a while. When I took up running, he took up cycling, and he wanted me to do a century ride about 2 years ago. That was a fun adventure. We didn't get that far, but we did finally complete a 68-mile ride. I hadn't ridden a bike in nearly 40 years. It was really quite interesting. You know, your feet in the clips, falling over, that kind of thing. He has always taken me beyond my comfort zone. About 6 years ago, he decided that we should go to Bangladesh on behalf of our church. Now, in 2006, he took my daughter, our oldest daughter, before she got married, to Italy, because she said, Dad, I want to do one more trip to Europe before I get married, and I'd love you to go with me. When my husband goes international with me, he takes me to Bangladesh. So, not exactly the same thing. But it was a mission trip, and it was good. And I know I need to get out of my comfort zone, and we were going to do work for our church or work for peacemaking. It was my first trip there, and the first trip there, our church likes people just to go and get immersed and just kind of experience the thing. You don't really do a whole lot. You simply just get to know the people. And the church over there, the group that we're with, is the first native-built church, and I can't say because of the 90% Muslim, and I want to be very careful that I don't reveal confidences that will put anybody in danger, but it was a great opportunity for us. Part of the growth of this church with this native pastor was to make sure that he did some church planning around the country, and one of the ways that he did that was establishing a medical camp for a week prior to having the church there, so he gave some good medical service to the people. So we'd been there for a while. We'd listened to the training at the little institute where we were at, and there was a mission representative, there was the local pastor, there was the pastor from somewhere in the Midwest and his son who'd come to speak at the conference, there was myself, and there was my husband, and there were 2 doctors, and we were all in this van, and we were traveling very far north of Bangladesh. And we came into this little community, and I noticed way off in the distance there was this group of people. And these 2 pastors were holding people back on this road, and I thought, well, he's just keeping it clear so we have a place to park in our van. Now, these roads were no wider than like from here to here. I mean, it's just amazing we didn't slide off one side or the other. But very, very, very rural. Everybody has a cell phone, but nobody has electric power. It's always fascinating to me. But we parked, and I heard, Rick and I were sitting in the very back of the van. And I didn't bring the pictures today because I just to protect confidences again, but we were sitting in the very back. It was like a 4-seater van. And I heard way up in front someone say the word procession, which I thought in terms of a parade. That's not what it means over there, exactly. But then I looked I saw the pastors holding people back. Then I looked way off in the distance, and through the rice field, there were people in white with caps, picking things up off of the field and had sticks in their hand, starting to yell, running toward the van. And I didn't think anything more, and the next thing I know, I hear a thump. And I could hear something hit the van, and I remember Rick grabbed me and said, "Get down," and he put his arm over me, and I had a shawl over my head, and I heard thump, 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 thump. And I knew, okay, the van's getting attacked. And then I heard some glass break, and that's when I started to pray. The only thing that came to mind was Psalm 23. And I thought about the green pastures and the still waters, that spa-like existence where we'd all like to live. And then I thought about that valley of the shadow of death. Lord, help us not to fear any evil, for you are with us. Your rod and your staff, they comfort us. You'll prepare a table before us in the presence of our enemies. Surely goodness and mercy. You anoint our heads with oil, and surely goodness and mercy. And I just kept praying whatever came to my mind, and then a rock hit my head. And it dawned on me, this must have something to do with stoning. But stoning, in those moments of crises, for some reason your heart's pounding and you're having rational thoughts at the same time. And I'm praying and I'm feeling this and I'm thinking, stoning, I never thought about that before. It was a weird experience. And I survived that. Eventually it slowed down, and we all had glass just covering us. And pretty soon Rick goes, honey, and I'm just staring down at my purse, which was my lifeline, there I just had everything of value in that. And I'm staring down at my purse. He goes, honey, we need to get out of the van. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm not getting out of this van. I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying right here. This is my purse. This is my life right here. I'm staying right here. I'm not going anywhere. He goes, no, honey, we need to get out of the van. We're being told to get out of the van. And I thought, okay, that's when panic set in. Okay, this is where they take you and they keep you for months and you get raped and all that. And there were 2 women of us there and I'm just thinking, this is not good. And I remember calling out of the van and looking down at the ground and thinking to myself, I've got to look up at these people. I've got to look up and see what my situation is, but I don't want to. Now, how many of you in conflict have been like that? I just want to hide. I know it's happening to me. I've been under attack. This is wrong. I'm really kind of going, Lord, I don't know why you're doing this to me. I remember one thought came to me. I didn't buy into this. This wasn't what I came for. Italy sounds a lot better. And, but I eventually lifted my scarf up and all the glass came off of it and I looked up and it was just the villagers. There were nobody there with sticks or stones. They were just staring at me. And, I thought, well, try to look nice, look peaceful, try to show some love. I don't know what I did. I was probably in a degree of shock. Eventually, we all piled back in the van and drove off to down the road, and they pulled over, and we all shook the glass out of our clothes and spent the day down at the major police station. One of the things I remember when we stepped out of the van is everybody took pictures. The villagers, everybody was taking pictures and videos, and believe me, it was all over. By the time we landed 40 miles down the road at the big police station, or that local police station, there were crowds of people waiting for that van to come in. And of course, we spent the whole day trying to explain and being treated by this police officer well. He grilled us. It's a very different world, very different culture. He grilled us, but we were treated then with, all they had was popsicles for my head. But a Muslim doctor, they had the head of a school, a Muslim school, come and apologize to us, and they do have freedom of religion in Bangladesh. It may have just been a big misunderstanding, but we spent a whole day in this environment. So why do I tell you this story? We came out fine, by the way. It actually turned out very good for the local pastor who was doing this, because they now trusted him to be this peacemaker in their environment. But why do I tell you this story? Because life has unpredictable moments. You may find yourself longing for the life that's the green pastures and the still waters. And God may say, you can have that for a while, and then I'm going to put you through the valley, and then you can have that for a while, and then I might put you through the valley. But trust me, because you can learn a lot in the spa. It restores your soul. Remember the passage? It restores your soul. But when you're in that valley, your rod and your staff, he disciplines you and he directs you. He anoints your head with oil. He heals you. And then he provides for you where? In the presence of your enemies. That's what being in conflict is. And that's what runs through my head. That passage it took on a whole new meaning for me after that event. Now, would I want to go back to Bangladesh and do that? No, I went back 2 more times. It was finally the 3rd time that I got a chance to really do something. We may never get back an opportunity to go back because of our circumstances, but God knows what he wants for us to do. And it's our job to say, where do you want to take me, Lord? I'm willing to go. It might be a pasture. It might be the valley for a while. But I don't need to fear what? I don't need to fear evil. When we fear something, we come up with all these strategies to prevent it or to control it. Instead, Lord, how do I walk into it wise and loving? That's what we're talking about with conflict. So if you take anything away from all of this detail, take away the fact that it's not complicated. It's really just using the wisdom that God gave you and walking slowly and trusting through a life that can become very unpredictable. Because in the end, surely goodness and mercy will follow you all the days of your life until you're in heaven. And then you will have it full. Let me close this in prayer.
We hope you enjoyed this message. Biola University offers a variety of biblically centered degree programs, ranging from business to ministry to the arts and sciences. Learn more at biola.edu.